Hi, everyone. I'm here with my friend Victoria Bowler, and we are talking about what to teach in music tomorrow. And specifically today, we are talking about steady beat. Now, steady beat is one of those things that you probably hear and you instantly think, oh, it's a kindergarten day. And that's not necessarily always the case because, as we know, in our truly spiral curriculum, the things that are always building from these foundational skills, we are going to take steady beat and we're going to get really, really good at it in kindergarten, and then we're going to take it all the way through everything we do because it is one of those foundational things. So steady beat is something that we're always practicing. We're always adding new flavors to, if you will. We're doing different types of things with. We're switching things up to make sure that kids have a strong sense of steady beat underneath whatever other musical concepts we might be exploring. So what do you have to add to that, Miss Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of that, and it's all of that and more. So going back to what you said about how this is a skill that we are going to start whenever music instruction starts. And for most of us, that is kindergarten. It might be a preschool or a TK or a first grade or whatever it is. Whenever your first, when you leave go, that is when steady beat starts. So for like I said, most of us, that's with young students, but if you're new at a campus, or if you just realize like that you want to kind of change the way you're teaching and do some things differently, then that might be with older beginners, or what we would consider to be older beginners. And just to kind of narrow in on this other really important comment that you made, Anne, about how this concept, even once it's established in kindergarten, it never goes away. We have never evolved past steady beat. This is something that when we think about what keeps our ensemble together, like when we do part work and rounds and ostinati and all this other stuff, that goes back to steady beat. And then it's also the basis. It's what we're going to compare every other rhythmic element to. Anything new, anything unknown in terms of a rhythmic element is going to come back to how does it compare to this steady pulse that we have throughout the music.
Yeah, so it's the glue that holds everything together once we start adding in those layers, and then it's just like the basis from which we compare everything else, right? So like when we were talking about some comparative stuff and some previous episodes, a lot of those, faster versus slower, we're going to talk about how the beat is manipulated, but it always stays the same. So it's always our reference point for whatever we're comparing it to delineate different rhythms and all of that type of stuff. One of the things, and this is something we didn't talk about before we press record, one of the things that I think has been interesting, particularly in some of the different summer programs that I've taught at, is this conversation about steady beat as it exists in simple duple versus compound duple. And for me, we can argue about sequencing later, but for me, 6/8 and like those rhythms and like time signature and like all of the nitty gritty theory stuff doesn't come until like later, mid to upper elementary school for me. But for me, that does not mean that we aren't doing songs in 6/8, right? So just like any other concept that we do, it's not like we're just singing So Me all day long in kindergarten and first grade. We're still doing lots of different rich pieces of musical repertoire that we can extract things from. So steady beat, particularly because for me, it's not necessarily like a present type of moment, not necessarily like here is steady beat, now you know it and you can go and write steady beat. It's not that type of thing in terms of literacy. It's much more experience based. So simple compound and simple duple happen in my classroom all the time to get that different feeling of steady beat. So you're lots of nodding, so I assume yes.
Yeah, and again, like with this idea of like I want to take what you said and I want to like keep going with it because there's so much more that we could unpack. But another conversation that we can get into, in addition to like what is the beat, because this is a subjective conversation. Yes, this gets into other conversations about microbeat and macrobeat.
Yep.
Do you want to say anything about that just very, very quickly?
No.
Okay.
I think that, sorry. I'm thinking about it as it comes up. I was thinking the same thing as you said it. And I think that what's the end goal? The end goal is to find, for our students to have a strong sense of internal pulse that consistently stays the same, right? And, I've seen some kind of anecdotal evidence. My girls go to a dance class that's lovely, and I love their teacher, and they do like an egg shaker song. And the first time they got the egg shakers out, they were keeping a steady beat, like kind of like the double beat. A lot of like exercise instructors will call it the double beat or like, whatever, which is really like the micro beat, right? Like this beat division or something, however you want to put the terms on it, whatever term you decide to use. But so all the kids were doing it kind of at that micro beat, and the teacher was doing it. Oh no, we're gonna go a little bit slower. And I just like my brain inside was like, no, like that's not what it is. It's not what it is. And their little heartbeats, and that was a really loud scream. But anyway, so I think again, what's the end goal? The end goal is to find a consistent pulse by which you can have your students refer other rhythms and other like musical qualities back to. So that might mean like they find a pulse on their own, and then you kind of help show them to make it either more micro or more macro based on how you're going to choose to notate something. I mean, gosh, who knew Steady Beat could turn up into this huge conversation about all these different things that happen in our classroom, right? Because depending on how you're going to notate something is going to impact where you ask them to keep the steady beat, right? So these are all the types of things that we need to be thinking about all the time on top of everything else. So
yes, if it feels like the steady beat, it's the steady beat, regardless of which steady beat. We can break it down to. Oh, there was one other thing that you said. Oh, this is something that you talk about a lot as well. You talked about, and this conversation about the ballet class, the dance class, is a good example of how the kids were going faster than the instructor. And this is something that you talk about a lot, about how kids need to move, their bodies move faster than our big adult bodies. And we see it all the time. Like if you say, everybody get up, then the kids get up. And us adults were like, you know, like, all right, like, or jump up and down, whatever kids do, their own internal pulse is at just such a quicker tempo than ours is. And that comes into play with steady beat as well. So when we translate that into teacher talk, it just means you might have to go a little bit faster, even if you feel tired, because students are going to go at their own internal tempo, which will be faster than ours.
Yeah. I have two more things to say, and then I'm going to share my activity because we could just talk around it all forever. But I'm kind of sharing a couple activities in the midst of it. So, yeah. So that that's something that this is like very meta. Anyway, this is something that Dr. David Frigo talks about a lot in the Delcroze training that I've done, like thinking about students' internal pulses. And, you know, if you ask students to just like walk around the room with no music, like you'll notice a lot, like anybody, you notice a variety of different like internal pulses, right? But kids are always just a lot faster. And I forget like what the BPM was that he said. I should look it up. But it's fast, right? It's faster than what ours would be. And so like an activity that he does or has shared is having them all walk and then kind of improvising some music to one of the students and having the kids listen to see like whether or not it's matching. So that's kind of a cool exercise to get a feel for what your kid's internal pulse is. And you could even just like tap a drum to that. And so you don't have to like sit at the piano or anything, but that would be a way to kind of explore those different pulses. And then the kids will want to experiment with moving faster or slower, right? Because they're more in tune to it. Did you have something to add before I share go ahead.
Just in the vein of another thing that you talk about a lot about, like music pedagogies are so much more than their label. So just for all the ORF people screaming like, I've done that at an ORF workshop.
Oh, yeah.
I've done that at an ORF workshop as well. But yes, like this, and I think that also speaks to like the universality, the universal nature of steady beat, right? Like we can explore it with a lot of different lenses and have a lot of very similar experiences because it is, like you said, the glue. Okay, keep going. The next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That was just the context that I've learned it, and I've probably done it in our workshop too. But anyway, so another thing too that I've thought of, and I've done this activity and have since gone back and thought, like, that's not exactly how I want to do this, is there's a little ditty. I want to say it's in one of the Choxy books, one of the Kodai texts, where it's just like, listen, here I come, someone special gets a drum. Yeah. And I think the idea, or at least the way I've done it, is like you're keeping that steady beat. So this is the steady beat, which feels like moderate to us, right? And then you take the drum around to kindergartners and you ask them to keep the steady beat. My kids always had such a hard time with that until I made it a little quicker. Listen, here I come, someone special gets a drum. And then they could kind of do it, but still they had their own internal pulse. So one of my goals for that was always like, are they keeping their own steady beat? Like, I don't care what the tempo is compared to even what I'm saying. Like, you'll always have those couple of rock star students who like, or those kids who just like latch onto that modeling, right? Who do it exactly that way. But as long as they're keeping a steady pulse, I think it's okay. So just to add to the whole like steady beat is very subjective. And like, we're just looking for a universal pulse. So do you have anything to add, or should I actually share what you can teach tomorrow?
No, I would just
In
say,
addition to everything
as
else,
we
yeah.
as we're looking at steady beat, that is something that we're going to see. We're going to see that students walk into our classrooms often keeping a steady beat, but they're keeping a steady beat in the context of their own bodies and not necessarily the external information of the tempo of the music around them. And that's our task, is to take something that they feel within their bodies, and we are going to kind of manipulate it to respond to a musical prompt. In this case, the tempo of the song that Anne is about to share.
Yeah, so the idea is that they're having some sort of oral stimulus, right? We're processing that. Let's just throw all the pedagogies in here today. Let's get like all Gordon with it and like do some ideation. No, but the idea that they're taking it in and then they can express something that reflects that, right? Exactly what you said. So my song today is called Umpy the Frog, and it is actually, do you know this?
No.
It is actually in compound meter, so it's notated in 6/8 for me, and you'll see why, because it's very triplety. I learned this from Cecile Johnson. She is my source for this, and she was my Pedagogy 3 teacher the last year she taught levels training at the SMU Kodai summer program, Plano ISD summer program. And I learned it when she was doing a passing, like special topics, a passing game. So this is a passing game. But the rhyme, it's not really a song, goes like this. Umpy the frog sat on a log, looking for something to eat. A nice juicy fly captured his eye, and to Umpy it seemed like a treat. And that's a really attractive sound to make on a microphone. All right, but listen to it one more time. And notice a couple of things that happen in comparison to the snaps, because there are a couple tricky little things here, okay? Here we go. Umpy the frog sat on a log, looking for something to eat. A nice juicy fly captured his eye, and to Umpy it seemed like a treat. All right, Victoria, do you notice anything that might be kind of tricky about this? Teacher talk. I wouldn't ask kindergartners this, but what do you think?
Yeah, when are we going to breathe in between these two phrases? Ba da da ba da 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 da. Or if we need to sneak a breath, ba da 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 ba da 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 da. Right, and kids will have a hard time, or they might. I haven't done this, but I can imagine that they will have a hard time trying to figure out where is the anacrusic element of the phrase and where is the downbeat of the phrase,
Yep.
and that is why we do steady beat, right? Because it doesn't really matter how you manipulate the text. At some point, we all are going to land together.
Yeah,
What do you
absolutely.
think?
So the rest and the very anacrusic nature of this, right? So because nice juicy fly captured his eye, and to Umpy, it seemed like there's a couple of internal anacrusis there, but it's very like clearly first section, second section. What happens when I teach this to kid is they put the slurp in the first rest, right? So there's 2 slurps instead of just at the end when he slurps up the fly, which is fine. Like, it's something that helps hold the space and then they can keep it. Some people, I've seen people be like, no, the slurp doesn't come to the end because it's important for the game. But I don't care. They get it. Like, it's fine. So something else you could do is Umpy the frog sat on a log looking for something to eat. Oh, yum. A nice juicy fly. You could just add something, right? But in general, they get it. It's just something to be aware of, right? So they add the slurp, or there's just kind of that weird, ominous, like, extra time there in the middle. So anyway, the way that I teach this to kids is just the way I teach the game as we teach the rhyme, and they get it because they beg for it. We play it over and over and over again. So I teach it just with spider fingers on knees. So instead of the snaps that you heard, those would be spider fingers or frogs dancing on their knees, right? And then when it's time to actually play the game, this is a passing game. I have a frog stuffed animal that I use, and they all hold out their hands standing in a circle, and stationary circle, not moving, standing, facing inward. And I, as the teacher, am always the one doing the frog for this game. And so they can feel and watch and track the steady beat. The reason why I say I'm always the one being the frog, let me explain the game before I get ahead of myself. So everybody's standing up with their lily pads, and I have the frog, and it's going around with Umpy the frog sat on a log, looking for something to eat. Oh, yum, a nice juicy fly captured his eye, and to Umpy it seemed such a treat. Slurp. Whoever is landed on the slurp sinks down off the lily pad, and then they sit and they have their frogs on their knees jumping. So it's an elimination game. Okay, it's an elimination game. And so with kindergarten, I always, at least for the first couple of times, I'm the one doing it. I've also played it before when somebody kind of loses their lily pad, then they get to be Umpy the Frog, right? And then after they have their chance with Umpy, they're still out, so they go grab some sticks. You could extend it that way. You could also just play it as a passing game. With kindergarten, I find it's a little tricky. Like, that's a lot for kindergarten, right? A passing game on steady beat, if steady beat isn't a really, really strong skill for them yet, if it's early in the year, or even if it's not, passing on the beat, understanding like when to stop, when somebody's out, like all of that is just a lot. So when I play this game with kindergarten, it's something that I'm generally the frog. So yeah, so that's Umpy the Frog. We teach it sitting with our frogs jumping on our knees. I do the passing game. The lily pads sync, and they can track and practice feeling the steady beat. One other thing that I have done in the past is had actual hearts that they hold in their hands as the lily pads with the magnet on the back, and then they can go put it on the board once they're out. And then we have steady heartbeat. So if you do want to do like more of a present type of moment for a steady beat, then we can have Umpy the Frog jumping over those hearts on the board once everybody's had a turn to like sync from the lily pads or whatever. So that's Umpy the Frog.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, and this is an interesting thing to talk about because we're definitely discussing steady beat, but there's also, and you already talked about this, there's the coordination of the passing game as well, right? So the passing game, and this is why you said you are doing the frog movements, right? Because kindergarten students, if you just say like, all right, today we're going to work on steady beat with the passing game, like it's there's so many like little scaffolds that we can help students with the passing game. So this is why I like that we're still experiencing the steady beat, and we had it right off the bat when we were just copying your jumping frog fingers, right? And then when we transfer it, we get to really see and we get to feel and we get to experience how a steady beat will move around the ensemble, but it always stays the same. It's a really, really lovely visual because you're doing the same thing that you're having students do when they go to the board and they track the steady beat on the board. You're doing the same thing here, but students are watching the beat not on the board, but around the actual, ensemble members.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is too, is like, there's so many with everything, there are so many different ways to take a musical skill, and a passing game with steady beat is pretty advanced, right? So you have like a physical feel of the beat, you have like keeping the beat while you're singing, you have moving gross locomotor steady beat, you have keeping it with rhythm sticks, which is actually, I think, easier or more accessible, I should say, than actually having to pass an object and like predicting when it's coming and grab,
I agree
pass,
with that.
like all that kind of stuff. Like there's just a lot involved. So I think that whenever we have, it's easy to be like, oh, this is great for steady beat, I'm going to do this. We have to think about kind of the skill within the skill, right? Before we get into some of those activities for kids. But yeah, it's a really lovely, lovely one. If your kids rock and roll with passing games, that's great. I also have played this with 4th and 5th grade when we've done 6-8 rhythms and we've talked about internal anacrusis, and they still go nuts for it, and they remember Umpy from like kindergarten, and it's super fun. So that's great. Thanks, Cecile, for sharing that with the world.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, well, speaking of upper elementary, let's go zoom to our big kids, and let's say that we need something that is going to be a steady beat situation, but with our 4th graders, if they have never done Bumpy the Frog, we may or may not have success with that, as our like very first steady beat. I don't know, like from a upper elementary culture perspective, it's like their very first day in music, and you're like, here we go, let's do this frog song, right? This frog rhyme, pardon me. Okay, so here's another option that we can do for our older beginners. I have some pop music playing in the background. You'll have to imagine that, this podcast has the budget to purchase the rights to whatever pop song, you want to do. Pick your favorite Rihanna from the Super Bowl, and that's what's playing in the background. No, but if for all, like my go-to piece for this is We Are Family from Sister Sledge, and I love it. It's a nice tempo, and students are walking in, and just silently we're copying my motions.
And these are snaps and claps for anyone just listening. Snap. Yeah.
One small change, though.
Just go watch the video if you're listening.
Small change.
These are all body percussion patterns.
Good. So we stop right there after a while. If you were to close your eyes and think about the sounds that we are making, they all have like a different sound to them because they're all like a different body percussion part. But does the distance between the sounds ever change? I'm not sure. Let's think about it. And we stop. What do you think, Anne?
No, they're always the same.
Always the same. Great. Next question for you. What's our pattern? Is it like a group of 3 things and we change, or is it a group of 7 things and then we change? What's our pattern? Let's think about that. And we stop. What's your thought, Anne?
It's a group of 4.
It's a group of 4. Sometimes you'll get different answers for this. Students might say 2, to which I would say, correct, absolutely. So now, can you find your own way to make your own body percussion pattern where all of the sounds are the same distance apart? Don't get too wacky with it. Everything is the same distance. And you can try out a couple different things, and the music is still playing, and students are just working on their own. And we stop. Now, this time, as we do the same pattern, can you look around the room and find someone's pattern that you like and see if you can take a part of their pattern and incorporate it into your pattern. Music's still playing, and students are looking around the room, incorporating something else that they see. Here we go. And we stop. Can you take your pattern that you just created after looking at someone else's pattern, and can you, whoosh, that's my sign, turn to a partner, whoosh, with your partner, can you find a way to combine your ideas? So now the music is still playing, students have their time to work, and after a while, I'm gonna pause the music and I'm gonna say double check that the distance between the sounds that you're making is still the same, that you're not using long and short sounds, everything is the same distance apart. And we keep working. After a while, it's time for everyone to turn back to the circle after we've been looking at our partners. And now we turn back to the circle and we say, all right, let's hear what everybody has been working on. Ready, go. And the whole class just does theirs all together. And there are several different layers that you can do here. One option is you and your partner look around the room and you find something else to take from another set of partners to incorporate into yours. That's a good option if you only want students working with a partner. The other option is your group of 2 now becomes a group of 4, and you're creating, you're combining your ideas with their group's ideas and actually collaborating in a group of 4. For this, I wouldn't go above a group of 4. You certainly could, but for this activity, that's kind of where it's kind of served its purpose. This is a nice thing to do as a warm-up activity. As students are walking in and we are looking for something that is collaborative, something that is musical, and something that has this social interaction and creativity element to it. This is with We Are Family, but it could certainly be with absolutely any song. You know, just pick your favorite clean, students can pick their favorite clean pop song to use with this. It's a very easy, like drag and drop, almost non-activity activity. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. So for folks who are thinking about ways to bring in music, like you could even have a kid suggest a song for the day. Like they could be the DJ for the day. It could be a class job or something like that. So that would be a super fun thing to do. Or it might be like a fun way to get into learning some songs for like an assembly that aren't necessarily part of your curriculum. You know, like all those the kind of ancillary things that like we have to do in our classroom. What I love about it is I think a lot of folks do like beat leader or like keep the beat leader type stuff. Like John Feyerabend I think has like a CD or a video or something, where like maybe that's just a natural part of people's warm up. So this is a really nice extension that emphasizes steady beat, right? And you could turn it into any meter. So if you wanted to get into 3 meter, or even some other more complicated things, this would be a really cool. You could put take 5 to it. It'd be a really cool thing to kind of experiment with that way. Yeah, like it's
for sure.
like it's a really nice clean canvas. For possibilities.
Yeah, and that's what you're saying. Like you can do take 5 because steady beat is everywhere. Steady beat is not simple duple exclusively. Yep, love it. Okay, so a lot of fun stuff today. We got into like the philosophical weeds, but then we brought it back to actual activities.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, So now, Anne, you and I have some time to think about what we want our next episodes to look like. We've done around 10, a little over 10 episodes at this point, and the plan at this juncture is to take a little break because, Anne, you have some exciting travels to do, right?
Yeah.
You get to
just
go with
a
your family.
A family trip, yeah. And then we'll be back to the grind and all that kind of stuff. So, but
So we have a little break coming up, and then we'll be back in a couple weeks. We have some exciting stuff that we're kind of mulling over. Anne, do you want to add anything to that?
no, just that this has been fun. So hopefully all you who are listening and watching are enjoying it too. And it's really helping you teach music tomorrow.